Welcome to video 3 of our video series on making sure that you can convey the importance of your work through your scientific writing. This video is for you if you are like most science writers that I have met who really struggle to have direct statements of what they think the impact of their work is or the value of their work is. So if you're ready to learn where to include these statements in your own writing and how to do this for yourself, then stay tuned. This video is for you. So in the previous video, when we talked about statements of the gap, we broke this down into both the separate abstract and the separate introduction. Here, we're going to do it all at the same time because you're going to include one statement that's going to be very similar between both your abstract and your introduction. And so in both of these sections, we're actually going to look at the very end of either our abstract or our introduction. And so we're going to be after we've already set up a problem, after we've explained a gap, after we've explained what we've done, we are going to give the reader a one-sentence sort of so what. And this is the sentence that we're looking at here. Okay, so this so what is going to tell the reader exactly where we think the importance or impact of our work is. So let's start with looking at this color-coded introduction. And notice here how in this entire introduction, we move from a very dark color to the lightest color. And so throughout this whole thing, it's very structured with the darkest color at the top, moving to the next darkest color and the next lightest and the next lightest till we get to the lightest color, except the very end of the introduction where we have again cycled back to one sentence of that darkest color. And this is the sentence here that we are going to focus on. If we look at the example of the abstract, that's going to be the one sentence color that's colored in purple at the end of the abstract here. And so what this sentence is going to do in both the introduction and the abstract is just bring your story full circle. Instead of just ending your introduction abruptly on what you did, or the same with your abstract, instead of ending it abruptly, we're going to cycle back around, bring the reader back around, and remind them of that problem we were trying to solve. But not only that, here we're not just stating a problem. We are showing how our work is addressing that problem. And even if we don't solve that problem, even if we don't fix that problem, if we're publishing a paper, then we believe we have at least contributed significantly towards that problem, and that should be stated. Again, remember that your reader is probably not going to interpret your work in the same way that you did. And so here, we want to help them a little bit here. We want to show them how our work addresses that problem, because unless they're an expert in our field, they are probably not going to be able to easily see that for themselves. So we're going to help them out a little bit here, again, both in the intro and in the abstract. And so to do this for yourself, to diagnose this for yourself, we're just going to look at the very end of our abstract and the very end of our introduction. I do have to say, especially on the abstract, this sentence is almost always the first one that gets cut when somebody wants to reach the word count, the specific word count of an abstract. I definitely don't want you to cut this sentence. Hopefully you realize it. So just keep that in mind. If you're missing the sentence, it's really common. It's a problem I see almost across the board at every level of science writing. So don't be too hard on yourself. But we're going to look then at these last sentences of the introduction and the abstract and see if we have something that is bringing it full circle. Here, I also want your sentence to be a little bit specific. I don't want you to just say, this paper deserves to be published because we've contributed significantly to this work. I don't want to see that type of sentence at all. What I want to see is, I want to see a sentence like, again, we're going to go back to this bird migration pattern. I want to see some kind of sentence like, these new radar-based methods for bird migration will provide more accurate data about migratory patterns, which will allow us to track changing climates with more nuance than has been previously available. So something like that, not something that is very generic, but something that is providing the reader with a very clear picture of what your work could be used for or what you expect to come from your work. So this is what we're going to put in these last two sentences here. Then, for these statements of impact or importance, there's another place now in our paper where we're also going to look, and that's going to be our discussion section. With this discussion, again, not going to go too much into detail on the breakdown, especially because I have a full breakdown video here on the website. There's a link below this video, and it's going to be the exact same discussion that I'm using here. So you'll be able to go to that video to see the detailed breakdown there if you're interested in that. Here, I'm just going to point out the places that we're interested in for conveying the importance or impact of our work. And there's going to be 2 places in our discussion we're going to look for that. The first place is going to be in our introductory paragraph, so the first paragraph of our discussion, and the next place is the last paragraph of our discussion, or our concluding paragraph. So when I color code a discussion, and just note here that the discussion is colored in different shades of purple. So when I color code a discussion, here we're going to look, again, I said that first paragraph. Notice that that first paragraph consists of 2 different points. The first paragraph contains a summary of the key results of the paper, and it contains text directly related to a gap in the field. And so what the point of this whole entire paragraph is doing is now relating your work to that gap or the main gap you brought up in either the introduction or abstract of the paper. And so here in this first paragraph, it's not just a summary of your results. So here we want to show how the results that we got are filling in holes that we explained existed previously in our field. This is the absolute direct way to convey the importance of your work, because you are showing exactly what you did and how it fills an existing hole that was in the field. So in this first paragraph of your introduction, it's rarely, I would say, structured like this right off the bat, but you can watch my previous video on discussions if you want more detail on that. But otherwise, I really strongly recommend having this paragraph in there, especially at the beginning, that directly relates what you did to that existing gap. This is a very clear, perfect way to indicate and highlight your importance and ultimately the reason why your work deserves to be published. And then finally, let's look at the last paragraph of this discussion. And notice that all of the colors here in this paragraph are really dark. These are the darkest colors, and that means that they're going to be the broadest in scope. Again, watch that discussion video if you want a little more detail here. But just note that from the color coding key here, that these are the broadest in scope. These are the most, I would say, forward-thinking points of the discussion, and they're all concentrated in this concluding paragraph. So essentially what we are doing with this concluding paragraph is showing how our science first maybe changed the gap in the field. Where is the new gap now that our science exists and is out there in the world? More importantly, what new things can be done because our science is now out there in the world? Why should people be excited? Both scientists in our field and out of field, as well as lay people. Why should people care that our work has been done? If we can adequately convey that, and where I recommend you doing that is this final paragraph of the discussion. If we can adequately convey that, though, we can very clearly express why our work is important and why our work deserves to be published. So here, I'm going to give you an example of a bad discussion. Don't blame the authors for this. This is one that I made up myself just to convey these points I want to show you, because this is how I find most people's discussions are going to look if you try to do my coloring scheme and you try to do this for yourself. What I want you to notice here is that this discussion does not start with that summary paragraph that I suggested for you. It does not end on that forward-thinking concluding paragraph that I suggested. And finally, the discussion starts with the authors talking about the field. And so these are the 3 most common things I see with the discussion, and these things prevent the reader from seeing the importance of your work. So if your discussion looks like this, no big deal. Again, most common discussions I see look like this. But the reasons we want to change this, we want to put your summary at the beginning related to your gap in the field. We don't need to talk about other work. This paper should be the origin story of your specific research here, okay? The rest of the work at this point doesn't matter. The discussion is about your research. So instead of talking about the field, instead of again trying to indirectly set up a problem so that the readers can see it, we're just going to directly state the problem and state how our research addressed that. So instead of having this opening paragraph that's talking about the field and again, setting up that problem, we're going to replace that with our paragraph of our summary of results related to that gap in the field. Again, then finally at the end, instead of having our summary at the end, which is a common conclusion mistake, you can check out the discussion video again for more details on this. We're going to have that forward-thinking discussion at the end. It's going to end the paper giving our reader exactly a so what, like so what that this work is done. And the answer to that so what is exactly why this work is important and why this work deserves to be published. Now, moving into grant proposals. Unlike the previous video, it's not as simple to fix this problem in grant proposals as directly relating it to the research paper, because most grant proposals are going to have a separate section that you have to include that is directly designed to state the innovations or impacts behind your work. And so this is the section where we really need to do this. Now, again though, because this is one of those problems of directly versus implied statements of problems or gaps or importance, we need to make sure that this impact or innovation section of our grant directly is stating the importance or impact of the work we are proposing to do. So notice here quickly, I'm going to show you again, colored section of a grant proposal. Notice here also that everything that is colored in this grant proposal is of a purple color, meaning it is of that impact color, that importance color. It is not green, indicating introductory material, and it is not orange or brown, indicating results. Almost all of this text here is direct statements of impact and importance. The impact section of your grant should have no introductory material, none at all. If you need introductory material in this section for it to make sense, you need to move that to the introduction. You should put that there. This section of your grant proposal is solely designed for making direct statements of the importance and impact of your work. So we're going to keep it to direct statements. Everything else should have already been set up in the introduction. The gaps should already be in the introduction of your grant proposal. And then when you get to this section, it's going to be as easy as making these direct statements. And then finally, one more point here to make about grant proposals is just because your grant proposal has a specific impact and innovation section, that does not mean that this is the only place in your grant proposal where you should be writing impact or innovation statements. Just like in the introduction or the abstract of a research paper where we have those statements at the end that convey the importance, that give the so what, we still want to do that with our grant as well. And ultimately, anywhere where it makes sense to point out to the reader a so what of why you would do something, of why a particular experiment or group of experiments or aim or whatever is important, please do write a direct statement there in whatever section of the grant you were in, okay? It is okay to have these direct statements sprinkled in throughout the grant, even though the grant already has this one very dedicated section. There is also one case here that is specific for grant proposals where you can include a little bit more impact. So check out this introduction of a grant proposal. I want you to look at what happens after this every single statement of a research gap here. Note, every single statement of a research gap is followed immediately by a little bit of text telling the reader where in the proposal this work is going to be addressed. This helps immediately show the impact or importance of your grant proposal because you are stating these direct problems that exist and are out there in the field, and you are showing right here immediately in your text how your grant proposal is going to address these issues. So to sum up how to include direct statements of your importance. First, in a research paper, you're going to check your abstract and your introduction. In both of those sections, you are going to look for the final sentence of both and make sure that that sentence is a direct answer to the question, so what? Okay, so what? Why did you do this research? If that sentence answers this question, then your abstract and introduction are good to go. Next, I want you to check your discussion section. Your first paragraph of your discussion should be a summary of the main work of the paper directly related to how that research or how those results affect the main gap in the field that you presented in the introduction. The next place I want you to check in your discussion is the final paragraph. I want you to check here, make sure that your conclusion is very forward-thinking, that it is full of explanations of why this work is important, why people should care about this work, both scientists and non-scientists, what can now be made, built, done, calculated, performed because your work exists and is out there in the world. Something that couldn't have been done before. So these are the places you're going to check in your research paper. For your grant proposal, you are going to first check those same sentences of the abstract and introduction as you did in a research paper. So even though it's a grant proposal, your abstract and your introduction should end with those sentences of why this work matters. So what? So what? Why are you proposing this? If you can answer those, you're already off to a great start. Next, though, with your grant proposal, you're going to jump to the impact or innovation or importance section. Here is where you are going to check and make sure that you have direct statements of the importance of your work and only direct statements of the importance of your work. Here, you want to cut out any introductory material, any background information, even the statements of the gap. They don't go here. They go in the introduction. Your impact section then is going to be undiluted, direct statements of why this work is important. Luckily, most of my science writers are pretty easily able to fill in these direct statements of importance once they know to look for them and once they know where to put them. Hopefully that's the case for you. So I would like for you to now go back and look at your research papers, your grant proposals, see if you have these statements. If you have any questions, please comment below. Otherwise, happy writing.